The display panel flickered. Again. Voxara sighed, tapping it with 3 of his 6 appendages in what his species called the universal fix. It wasn't universal, and it definitely wasn't fixing anything. "Come on, you worthless piece of junk," Vox muttered, his voice raspy from the thinning atmosphere. "Work for once in your miserable existence." The life support readout stabilized momentarily before plunging back into the red. 27 days. That's how long they'd been stranded in this empty pocket of space, forgotten by the universe and apparently by the entire Nebulon Collective. 27 days since their ship, the prestigious Stellar Whisper, had encountered what Science Officer Mira had excitedly called a fascinating gravitational anomaly right before it ripped through their propulsion system like tissue paper. Vox checked his personal atmospheric filter. 6 hours of breathable air remaining. After that, he'd be relying solely on the ship's failing life support, just like everyone else. Maintenance Technician Voxara. The voice booming through the comm made him flinch. Captain Jaxel's tone carried the same imperial condescension it always had, even with death looming. "Report to the command center immediately." "Yes, Captain," Vox replied automatically, peeling himself away from the panel. As the lowest-ranking crew member aboard a research vessel staffed by the Collective's brightest minds, Vox was accustomed to being summoned like a pet. The corridors of the Stellar Whisper were eerily silent. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the once pristine passages. The ship had been the pride of the Collective's exploratory fleet, all-sweeping architecture and gleaming surfaces designed to showcase the superiority of Nebulon engineering. Now it was just an elaborate coffin drifting through the void. When Vox reached the command center, the atmosphere was tense. Captain Jaxel stood rigidly at the view screen, his scaled skin reflecting the dim emergency lights. Science Officer Mira hovered nervously nearby, her 4 eyes blinking in that rapid pattern that indicated extreme stress. Engineer Tark was slumped in a corner, listlessly tapping at calculations everyone knew were pointless. "Our 23rd distress signal was just sent," Captain Jaxel announced without turning. "Still broadcasting on all collective frequencies." Vox waited for orders, instructions, anything. When none came, he ventured, "Is there something you needed me to fix? Repair? Miracle?" Jaxel spun around, his neck frills flaring with barely controlled rage. "Unless you've been hiding extraordinary talents beneath that maintenance uniform, technician, I doubt there's anything you can do that Engineer Tark hasn't already attempted." Mira stepped forward. "Captain, that's hardly fair? We're 6 light years from the nearest collective outpost with failing life support and no propulsion. Fair left the equation 27 days ago, officer." Tark looked up from his calculations. "The oxygen recyclers are at 17% efficiency and dropping. At current consumption rates, we have approximately 48 hours before we all suffocate." "Yes, thank you for the continuous updates on our impending demise," Jaxel snapped. Vox stood silently, wondering why he'd been summoned if only to witness the command crew's breakdown. Then the emergency console chimed a sound they hadn't heard in weeks. "Incoming transmission," Mira whispered, hope and disbelief coloring her voice. "But it's not on any collective frequency. The transmission wasn't from the collective." "Of course it wasn't. Why would they waste resources on a lost cause?" Vox watched the command crew's hope deflate like a punctured air sac. The signal had been nothing but cosmic background radiation playing tricks on their desperate minds. That was 3 days ago. Now the Stellar Whisper was officially dying. "Environmental controls failing on Deck 4, announced the ship's automated system, its synthesized voice eerily cheerful despite delivering news of their impending doom. "Please contact maintenance personnel immediately." Vox didn't bother responding. He was busy trying to reroute power from the recreational facilities to the life support systems. Not that anyone used the meditation chambers anymore. The crew had split into factions, those who spent their final days in scientific observation and those who had surrendered to the inevitable. A technician. Why haven't you responded to the alert? Science officer Mira appeared behind him, her usual pristine appearance now disheveled. One of her 4 eyes was clouded over a stress response common among her subspecies. Because responding would waste oxygen, Box replied flatly. And there's nothing to fix with spare parts we don't have. Mira's neck frills fluttered anxiously. That's insubordination. Write me up. File a formal complaint with Captain Jaxel. Oh wait, none of that matters now, does it? Box immediately regretted his tone. I'm sorry, Officer Mira. I'm just tired. Mira deflated, leaning against the corridor wall. The ancestral current will carry us home, she whispered the traditional Nebulon death prayer. Do you really believe that? Box asked. What? As a lowly maintenance technician from the outer colonies, he'd never fully embraced the collective's spiritual teachings about returning to the galactic energy stream after death. I have to, Mira replied. Otherwise, dying forgotten out here is just 2 she couldn't finish. The ship lurched suddenly, sending them both stumbling. The emergency lights flickered ominously. What was that? Mira gasped. Engineer Tark's panicked voice came through the comm system. Power coupling failure in Section 7. We're losing atmospheric containment. Vox was already running before Tark finished speaking. Section 7 housed the auxiliary life support. Without it, they'd have hours instead of days. In the central hub, chaos reigned. Captain Jaxel was shouting orders nobody could fulfill. 3 crew members were engaged in a heated argument over the remaining emergency rations. The ship's philosopher, Dr. Lenti, was calmly recording his final observations on collective behavior during extinction events. If we reroute emergency power from the communication array, Tark was suggesting when Vox arrived. No. Jaxel's voice cracked with authority. The distress signal is our only hope. Hope? Engineer Tark laughed bitterly. The collective has written us off. You know the protocol for vessels lost beyond recovery parameters. It was true. The Nebulon Collective's resource management directives were clear: no rescue missions that endangered additional ships or personnel. Practical, logical, cold. There are other spacefaring species, Mira said quietly. Ismox. The room fell silent. You can't possibly mean Captain Jaxel's voice was dangerously low. The humans, Mira continued. Their outpost is only 2 systems away. Vox felt the collective shudder that ran through the crew. Humans, the unpredictable savages. The emotional, impulsive bipeds who'd carved out territory through sheer stubborn recklessness rather than careful planning. I would rather die with dignity than be rescued by those barbarians, Jaxel declared. Several crew members murmured agreement. What exactly do we know about humans anyway? Vox asked, surprising himself with his boldness. Real experience, not just collective propaganda. They're dangerous, Dr. Lenti offered immediately. Their history is nothing but violence and conquest. They disregard protocols, added another officer. They make decisions based on feelings rather than logic. They're known to attempt rescues with only a 17% chance of success, Engineer Tark said with disgust. Completely irrational resource allocation. Vox considered this last point carefully. So they might actually come for us. Before anyone could respond, the emergency console chimed again, louder and more insistent than before. Another transmission, Mira whispered, rushing to the console. Her 4 eyes widened as she scanned the incoming signal. It's in universal trade language. She looked up, her expression unreadable. It's from a human vessel. The entire command center froze as Mira played the transmission. Nebulon vessel. This is Captain Sofia Reyes of the Earth Interstellar Alliance ship Horizon. We've detected your distress signal and are offering assistance. Please respond with your status and requirements. Over. The voice was jarringly casual, lacking the formal protocol declarations that would have preceded any collective communication, and the accent so flat and blunt compared to the melodic tones of Nebulon speech. "Terminate that transmission immediately," Captain Jaxel commanded, his neck frills standing fully erect, a sign of extreme agitation. "We will not compromise the integrity of this mission by associating with humans." "What mission?" Vox blurted out before he could stop himself. "We're dying out here?" Engineer Tark nervously tapped his claws against the console. "The technician isn't wrong, Captain. Our primary mission parameters became irrelevant 27 days ago. Survival is now the only logical objective." The ship lurched again, more violently this time. The lighting flickered and then dimmed further as another system failed. Atmospheric degradation accelerating, the ship's computer announced. Estimated habitability, 22 hours. Dr. Lenti stepped forward. "Captain, perhaps we should view this as an anthropological opportunity. No Nebulon has had extended contact with humans since the Proxima incident. The cultural data alone would be invaluable to the collective. If we survive to deliver it," muttered Vox. Jaxel paced the command center, his steps jerky with stress. "The humans cannot be trusted. Their historical records show them responding emotionally rather than logically. They are unpredictable, dangerous, and apparently willing to help strangers in deep space," Mira interrupted, "which is more than our own people have done." The comm system pinged again. "Nebulon vessel, we're picking up critical failures in your life support systems. We're preparing to approach. Please advise on docking compatibility. Over." Vox leaned toward Mira and whispered, "How do they even know what our life support signatures look like?" "They've been studying us," Mira whispered back, "while we've been avoiding them." Captain Jaxel's inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a sign of intense internal conflict. Finally, with a gesture that seemed physically painful, he nodded to Mira. "Respond to them. Basic information only. No technical specifications of the ship. No details about our research." Vox couldn't contain his curiosity. While the others debated the proper protocol for communicating with savages, he moved to the observation port. And there it was, the human vessel coming into view. It looked nothing like the sleek, symmetrical designs of Nebulon ships. This craft was bulky, asymmetrical, with odd protrusions and seemingly random variations in its hull plating. Yet somehow, at this moment, it was the most beautiful thing Vox had ever seen. "This is Science Officer Mira of the Nebulon Collective vessel Stellar Whisper. We acknowledge your offer of assistance," and she paused, glancing at Captain Jaxel, who nodded stiffly, "except with gratitude." The response came almost immediately. "Great. We'll be alongside you in about 20 minutes. Our scans show your docking mechanisms are compatible with our universal adapter. Prepare for connection on your starboard auxiliary port. Horizon out." "Great? Just great?" Captain Jaxel's frills twitched with indignation. "Is this how humans conduct formal rescue operations?" The human ship grew larger in the viewport. Unlike the elegant symmetry of Nebulon vessels, the Horizon was a cobbled-together collection of modules, bulky engines, and seemingly random protrusions. Its hull bore scars of previous encounters with space debris and what appeared to be hasty repairs. Vox couldn't take his eyes off it. "It's magnificent," he whispered. "It's barbaric," corrected Dr. Lenti, though he too was staring in fascination. "Look at those inefficient propulsion arrays. And that hull design violates at least 17 principles of aerodynamic optimization. Yet they're here, and our own people aren't," Vox replied quietly. The final approach of the Horizon was anything but the precise, calculated maneuvers taught in Nebulon space academies. The human vessel seemed to lurch, adjust, overcorrect, and finally settle into position with a casualness that made Captain Jaxel visibly flinch. Initiating docking sequence, came the human voice again. Hey, quick question. Your atmosphere mixes nitrogen-oxygen with trace chlorine, right? Our records on nebulon physiology are a bit outdated. Mira looked shocked at the direct question about their biology. Such information was considered sensitive in Nebulon culture. Yes, she replied hesitantly. Why do you? Just checking so we don't accidentally poison you when the airlock opens. That would be a pretty bad first impression, right? The human actually laughed during a rescue operation. The docking clamps engaged with a shudder that ran through the dying stellar whisper. The ship's computer announced, foreign vessel connected. Airlock integrity holding at 97%. 97%? Engineer Tark looked horrified. That's well below safety protocols. It'll hold, came the human voice, apparently overhearing through the comm system. We're coming through now. 3 of us, myself and 2 engineers. Before Captain Jaxel could organize a proper reception party with the appropriate ceremonial formations, the airlock cycled open. 3 figures stepped through, wearing lightweight environmental suits rather than the full protective gear Nebulons would have donned for first contact. The lead human removed her helmet, revealing a face with dark eyes and what Vox recognized as a smile, a baring of teeth that, paradoxically, indicated friendliness in humans rather than aggression. Captain Sofia Reyes, she said, extending a hand in what Vox recalled was a human greeting gesture. Sorry about the dramatic entrance. We pushed our engines pretty hard when we picked up your distress call. Captain Jaxel stared at the extended hand as if it might bite him. Captain Jaxel finally extended 3 appendages in a stiff approximation of the human greeting. We appreciate your assistance, though I must express concern about your unorthodox docking procedures. Captain Reyes grinned wider. Sometimes you gotta improvise. These are my engineers, Priya and Marcus. The 2 humans nodded. One was already scanning the corridor with a handheld device that looked cobbled together from mismatched parts. Your life support is holding on by a thread, the one called Priya said, tapping her scanner. Major power coupling failure at the core distribution node. We brought some universal adapters, but they'll need modification to work with your systems. Impossible, Engineer Tark interjected. Our technology is proprietary to the collective. Even with the correct components, reconfiguration would require specialized knowledge of. Mind if I take a look? Marcus interrupted, already moving toward the engineering section without waiting for permission. Vox found himself following the humans, fascinated by their casual disregard for protocol. Captain Reyes walked alongside Captain Jaxel, speaking in a relaxed manner that clearly unsettled the Nebulon commander. We've rescued 3 ships this sector in the past month, Reyes was saying. Gravitational distortions from the nearby pulsar have been messing with navigation systems. Your collective should really update their charts. The collective's stellar cartography is precisely calculated and regularly updated according to established schedules, Jaxel replied stiffly. Reyes shrugged. Well, the universe doesn't always follow schedules. In engineering, Marcus had already removed several panels and was examining the Stellar Whispers power distribution system with evident delight. This is beautiful work. Elegant. Maybe a bit over-engineered, but beautiful. Tark looked simultaneously offended and pleased. Problem is, Marcus continued, you've got no redundancy in your power routing. One failure cascades through the whole system. Redundancy would be inefficient, Tark responded automatically. The collective designs for optimal functionality, not failure. Everything fails eventually, Priya said matter-of-factly, joining her colleague. That's why we humans build our ships like puzzles. Parts can be swapped, bypassed, or replaced with something completely different if necessary. What happened next was unlike anything in Vox's experience. The humans worked with a chaotic energy that defied Nebulon methodologies. They talked constantly, joking, arguing, thinking aloud while their hands moved with surprising precision. They repurposed materials in ways that made engineered Tark visibly uncomfortable, creating workarounds that violated numerous collective engineering protocols. "This can't possibly work," Tark muttered as Marcus connected a human power converter directly to the Nebulon life support system. "Maybe not forever," Marcus agreed cheerfully, "but it'll get you home." After 4 hours of work that Vox could only describe as controlled chaos, the emergency lights brightened and the ship's computer announced life support restored to 68% capacity. The Nebulon crew exchanged looks of disbelief. "Not perfect," Priya admitted, wiping sweat from her forehead, "but enough to reach your nearest outpost if we give you a tow." "A tow?" Captain Jaxel's frills flattened in alarm. "That would violate at least 12 interstellar navigation protocols." Captain Reyes leaned against a bulkhead. "Protocols won't get you home, Captain. Sometimes you have to bend the rules to survive." While the captains debated the propriety of towing procedures, Vox helped the human engineers gather their tools. Curiosity finally overcame his reserve. "Why did you come for us?" he asked quietly. The risk assessment couldn't have justified the expenditure of resources. Marcus looked confused. "You needed help. We were close enough to provide it." "But the probability calculations—" "We didn't calculate," Priya interrupted with a smile. "When we heard your distress call, Captain Reyes just said, 'Let's go get them,' and plotted a course." This simple statement upended everything Vox had been taught about rational decision-making. That's not how spacefaring civilizations are supposed to operate." "Maybe that's why we're out here finding you instead of the other way around," Marcus suggested gently. 26 hours later, with the stellar Whisper securely tethered to the horizon, Vox stood at the viewport watching stars streak by. Captain Jaxel had retreated to his quarters, unable to bear the indignity of being towed. Most of the crew followed his example, but Vox remained with the humans, learning their strange techniques and stranger perspectives. In the collective, Vox explained to Priya as they monitored the power couplings, "We're taught that emotions lead to error. That the most advanced species are those that outgrow their evolutionary instincts." "Sounds boring," Priya replied. "Our instincts got us to the stars just fine. Curiosity, compassion, stubbornness, their features, not bugs." Vox realized with sudden clarity that the collective's understanding of humans was fundamentally flawed. These weren't primitive savages ruled by impulse. They were something much more interesting, a species that had embraced their nature rather than trying to transcend it. As they approached the Nebulon outpost, Vox made his decision. When the collective debriefed the crew about their regrettable encounter with humans, he would tell the truth about these remarkable beings who came when called, who fixed what was broken, and who did it all with a smile. The universe suddenly seemed much larger and much more hopeful than the collective had ever taught him to believe.